Well, I've spent quite a bit of time working in the field in lots of locations, not just in Australia, around the world. And it's really quite stimulating to get out there in the bush in Australia and try to absorb the landscape before you put it down. It's fantastic, though, to get back to Western Australia, and it never ceases to amaze me how diverse our landscape is just here in Western Australia alone. These two locations were so diverse that it's incredible to think that they were in the one country, let alone the one state. I've painted in the southwest before because I used to have a studio down there, and I spent quite a bit of time in and around Nannup and the Blackwood River. So it's always been a subject that's dear to my heart, and it's inexhaustible as far as material is concerned. But in this exhibition I travelled wider afield down there and followed a lot of the river courses through the southwest. And juxtaposed to that, of course, was the coastline of the Kimberley. I've painted inland in the Kimberley, and that's beautiful and rugged and a stunning landscape in all respects. But to be out on the ocean and looking back at that coastline, if anything, was more spectacular. It's always exciting to work on location. To work in the field has a certain immediacy to it. The problem I have is I like to finish these works on a larger scale that is not practical in the field. So I tend to work on paper with mixed media in the field and material and media that will dry fairly quickly and is easy to transport. And then bring those studies back to Perth to my studio and work on that larger scale, generally in acrylic and oil. Of course, getting to these two locations involved some very interesting modes of transport. My literature in the build-up to this exhibition has suggested that I walked the Bibbulmun Track. Sounds like I walked for hundreds of kilometres. That was not the case. I have to confess right now that my first attempt, the first 6-day trek or so, I managed to turn my ankle on the first day, much to the amusement of most of my friends and family. And there I was looking for their support, and what did I get? Nothing. Laughter. Ridicule. I'm happy to report, though, that I did go back to the Bibbulmun with my backpack and did walk some of it. Not all of it, but some of it. Most of this work was collected at various campsites along various rivers through the southwest. I was rewarded, though, of course, because the next part of this exhibition involved the trip along the Kimberley Coast. And this was a mode of transport put together by the Kimberley Quest 2, that luxury craft. It involved a flight to Broome, a light aircraft up onto the Mitchell Plateau, a chopper around the Mitchell Plateau which landed on top of the boat, and then I was dragged quite willingly all the way back to Broome over the following week. Absolute luxury. I found myself a beautiful table on the upper back deck where I could set up my painting gear and leave it set. So most afternoons after we'd finished trekking and fishing, I confess, I would spend the afternoon sitting up there painting and collating the thoughts of the day. It's probably the most pleasant studio I've ever worked in. there was something very intimate about the southwest journey, in that most of the time I was on my own and enveloped in the forest, and apart from the sounds of nature, it was a very, very quiet place to be, and a great atmosphere to get together with one's thoughts about how one would depict this landscape. It was, as I say, quite intimate, because you tend, after a while, to feel as though you're just part of it, just visiting this majestic forest and all its creatures, and big and small moving through it. You just become one of them, like one of them, and tread gently. The antithesis of this, of course, was on a pleasure craft, the Kimberley Quest 2, with other guests, and wide open spaces, and the grandeur of those cliff faces reflected in that beautiful water. Everything about it was grand, and the waterfalls were huge. The power of nature on those cliffs and the landscape, seeing them bent and twisted. Apart from the physical journeys to these two locations, when I arrived back here in Perth in my studio, I go through another two journeys really. One is to try and document the work as I saw it, in a very figurative sense, in a traditional way. And for me, that's really part of the learning process, to analyse at a deeper level what I've observed on the trip, before I have the courage, I guess, to move into and towards abstraction. It's always, for me, a leap of faith, given my training in graphics, which is a fairly tight mode of art, all about straight lines and being neat and tidy, to move into something that's a bit freer and looser and spontaneous has always been a battle for me. It's where my heart lies, but I have trouble getting there. It wasn't my intention to write music for this particular exhibition, but as I drew close to completing the work, I couldn't help myself. So I've written one little piece that I think emotionally sums up those two journeys. It's always interesting as I approach the end of one of these endeavours, in this case two endeavours, two locations, to try and tell the story with paint and give to you some of the emotion that I feel about these places, because it is very subjective, and my interpretation is not necessarily going to suit everybody that looks at it. That's obvious, that's a given. So all I can do is throw these up on the wall for you and interpret them genuinely, and hope that you enjoy taking these two journeys with me.